What's up, short attention span history nerds? You ever hear of a little boat called the Titanic? It was supposed to be unsinkable, or at least that's what the Irish News and Shipbuilders magazine claimed. Spoiler, it sank. The story of the Titanic has captivated people for decades. Then the largest ship in the world, the Titanic, left Southampton for New York on Wednesday, April 10th, 1912. On board were 1,316 passengers. With her crew of 892, she carried a total of 2,208 people in all. Although she was only a little more than half full, her 20 total lifeboats could only carry about half the people on board. At 11:40 p.m. on the night of Sunday, April 14th, she struck an iceberg to the southeast of Newfoundland, which fatally damaged the hull. The ship sank 2 hours and 40 minutes later, with the loss of more than 1,500 lives. While you may think you know all there is to know about the ship's fateful night and the discovery of its wreckage in 1985, you don't. Here are some interesting facts most people don't know about the Titanic. The search for the Titanic was a cover story for a top-secret Cold War mission. The U.S. Navy sent National Geographic Explorer at Large, Bob Ballard, on a top-secret mission to investigate the remains of two nuclear submarines, the USS Thresher and the USS Scorpion, both of which had sunk to the bottom of the North Atlantic during the early years of the Cold War. And it wasn't until his successful investigation of the Scorpion that Ballard requested the use of the remaining 12 days and allotted resources of his expedition to find the Titanic. Ballard's expedition to study the Scorpion was integral to his discovery of the Titanic. When the Scorpion sank in 1968, the submarine imploded. Ballard learned a tremendous amount from mapping the Scorpion, especially how the debris from its implosion could be found for almost a mile. Ballard had an epiphany. Don't search for the Titanic, search for the trail of debris. This strategy led him and his team to discover the unsinkable ship on September 1st, 1985, at the depth of 12,540 feet. Ballard returned to the Titanic in 1986 to document the wreckage. While the public was enthralled with the discovery of the Titanic, Ballard returned to the ship in a research vessel known as the HOV Alvin. Inside the Alvin was an 8,000-pound titanium pressure sphere into which the 6-foot-tall Ballard and two other men squeezed into to document the wreckage. Only 7 deck chairs from the Titanic are known to exist today. Now, dozens of chairs were thrown into the water as the Titanic was sinking in hopes that they could serve as flotation devices for the passengers. However, the hypothermia caused by the 28-degree weather rather than the drowning claimed most of the victims' lives. Stacks of deck chairs were pulled out of the water by rescue ships, but only 7 have existed to this day. Wallace Hartley, the band leader aboard the ship, refused to stop playing even as the ship sank. He felt it his mission to try and calm the frantically scared passengers and crew members. Wallace Hartley and the other musicians on the ship never stopped playing as the ship sank. They first were playing upbeat tunes and ended with softer songs to soothe the crowd. Many survivors reported that they ended with the hymn, "Nearer My God to Thee." His music pouch was found strapped to his body with the sheet music tucked inside. Hartley was lauded as a hero, and that same final hymn was sung at his funeral, which drew 30,000 people to pay their respects. One of the most expensive suites on the Titanic was booked for J.P. Morgan, who later changed his plans and didn't sell that fateful voyage. You may recall Rose and Cal's suite from the 1997 blockbuster movie Titanic. This suite, which included 2 bedrooms, a sitting room, 2 wardrobe rooms, and a private bath, was originally booked for the financier J.P. Morgan. However, he changed his plans and the suite ended up being occupied by Charlotte Cardeza, her son Thomas, and their staff, and they all survived that night. 47-year-old John Jacob Astor, one of the richest men in the world, was aboard the ship on its maiden voyage with his 18-year-old wife Madeline. Boy, I bet those were some riveting conversations. As you can imagine, the Astors were quite the scandal, and to make matters worse, Madeline was 5 months pregnant at the time. They were returning to the U.S. for an extended honeymoon aboard the Titanic, and as the ship was sinking, John helped his young wife climb through a window on the promenade deck to board a lifeboat, but he himself was unable to join her because of the ship's decree of women and children only. He did not survive that night. The coat Marion Wright Wolcott wore while escaping the Titanic was considered her lucky coat. Marion Wolcott boarded the Titanic, leaving her home in England to marry her fiancé in Cottage Grove, Oregon. She wore a wool coat while escaping the ship that tragic night, and as many of you that have owned wool coats know, they only get heavier as they get wet. Upon arriving in New York, she married her fiancé as soon as possible, and she insisted on wearing the coat as she believed that its luck would prolong their marriage, and it did. Her coat was so lucky that she cut strips of fabric out of it to make Bible covers for her 3 sons as they served overseas during World War II. And as you may have guessed, they all survived. A lost key could have been the reason the ship hit the iceberg. The ship's lookouts, Frederick Fleet and Reginald Lee, didn't have access to binoculars during the journey and therefore couldn't see very far. While the night was clear, they were in well-known territory for icebergs. Had they had access to the binoculars, there's a good chance that they could have spotted the icebergs that sank the ship in time to either avoid them completely or at worst just glance the icebergs. Now what happened was the ship's second officer was replaced at the last minute and forgot to hand off the keys to the locker that housed the ship's binoculars. The 2 lookouts didn't have time to hunt down the second officer and went straight to work. At the memorial of Frederick Fleet, one of the lookouts, a prankster, left a pair of binoculars with a note reading, "Sorry for bringing these 100 years too late." Not very funny. Fleet had committed suicide in 1965 after the death of his wife. In the race to publish a headline about the disaster, numerous newspapers gave families and loved ones false hope about the sinking of the Titanic. The World reported no fatalities. The Daily Mail declared no lives lost, and the Belfast Telegraph claimed no danger of loss of life. American newspapers, on the other hand, were able to take advantage of the time difference, and their headlines were more accurate. The New York Times, for example, ran the headline, "Titanic sinks 4 hours after hitting iceberg, 866 rescued by Carpathia, probably 1,250 perished. Ismay safe, Mrs. Astor maybe, noted names missing." No city was more affected by the Titanic sinking than Southampton, England, where the ship had departed from. In one school, half of the students lost their fathers. According to the Daily Echo, at one Northam school, 120 of the 240 pupils lost their fathers. Northam is a neighborhood in Southampton. Most of the crew members were from that city, and only 213 crew members survived, while 686 died. The Daily Echo also reported that one widow who had just given birth to twins found out that her husband had died and herself died of shock. The USS California is known for having been near the Titanic when it sank, but not coming to its aid until it was too late. 3 years after the Titanic, the California itself sank too. Multiple bad judgment calls led to the California not helping the Titanic. The ship's radio was allegedly shut off for the night when the Titanic hit the iceberg, and when the captain was awakened by the flares the Titanic had been setting off, he assumed that they were just fireworks. By the time the SOS message finally came through, it was too late. However, the California wasn't long for this world either. It sank in November 1915, torpedoed by a German submarine during World War I. Anne Elizabeth Isham perished because she refused to leave her dog behind. Isham reportedly jumped out of a lifeboat once she realized that she couldn't take her Great Dane with her. It's been speculated that a woman found in the water with her arms wrapped around a large dog was Isham, though it's impossible to know for sure. So, these are some of the most interesting facts that I've been able to discover. If I've missed an interesting fact, leave it in the comment section below. If you found this content interesting, please consider subscribing to 10 Minute History and hitting the thumbs up button. Also check out my other videos. Until next time.